All right. Well, welcome to another episode of Understanding the Science of You, where we are blessed to have guests that are open, that are willing to be, vulnerable and go underneath the hood and have some real talk to help other people better understand themselves, navigate life, and improve their own quality of life. Right. And so today, very fortunate to be blessed with Wije here today. And Wije and I crossed paths because, I think the world is full of intelligent, competent people, and sometimes just catching a break separates, monetary success, and sometimes it can be just that simple, right? Wije helped me in a lot of ways that I just want to be on the record for, because it was my experience has been not just for myself but anybody, but in order to break out of molds, continuing to grow and evolve, right? You don't know what you don't know. And so being exposed to new things, being challenged in productive and healthy ways and respectful ways, those are all really key things to growth. And Wije, I was very blessed to have Wije be able to challenge me in ways that I had not been used to. But he does, I don't know if you know this, I think I've shared maybe bits and pieces, but even though on the outside of things, right, I came across as very confident or convicted, right? A lot of that what I would call was like my skunk juice, right? It was kind of like, 'cause I was more of a concrete covered marshmallow, right? And you helped me to better understand and appreciate myself, both professionally, what I had accomplished, and gave me it was kind of a boost in a way that I needed when I was turning a new chapter of life. And I guess I needed the next part of my learning phase that I needed to go through was how to work out what kind of a man, person, human I wanted to kind of be. And part of that learning experience meant that unfortunately I took the low road, right, with our opportunity together, where, instead of being appreciative of things, right, I took then more of an arrogant side internally of like, hey, you know what I mean? Like, hey, actually I do have some value, and I need, and I need to stand up for myself more and things. And I took more of the toxic masculine side. And like you said, that we had like fighting matches and this and that. And while you were awesome and allowing me to work through those things, I always knew like, this isn't the right way to do stuff. Right. I mean, don't get me wrong. I hadn't figured out another way to do it yet. Right. But I knew there was a better way. I'd seen plenty of other people do a better way. I just hadn't figured it out. And anyway, and so that being said, you had exposed me to all types of things that over the last few years of my life really helped me to understand, hey, this is where you demonstrated, this is another way to communicate. This is another way to conduct yourself. This is, you guys had given me the term, respond, don't react. Right. And so I've spent a lot of time trying to continue to do that and working on it anyway. So I just want to make sure to, I guess, be on the record for the patience, the appreciation, the belief that you had definitely demonstrated to me in my life at a time when I needed it, even though I didn't necessarily show that to people. And even more of a testament appreciation is that we both kind of knew that, hey, maybe that wasn't the right time for us to cross paths, but there's something there. And that something there is now finally starting to poke his head out for us. And it's getting fun and exciting, right? And so we're reconnecting again. And honestly, it's a lot more fun for me this time because I'll just admit, I don't have my head up my ass so much. Anyway, so thank you for joining me still today.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure. And, I think you're a brother from another mother.
Absolutely.
And that's the way I look at it. And what's interesting about friendship is, the way I define it is you can have these hard conversations and but still there's respect. And one of the things I respect, I respect many things about you, but your brain is phenomenal. And I like being around people like that because, despite some BS coming out of your mouth, I mean, I am challenged. So it's really, it's mutually beneficial, I hope.
Absolutely.
But, timing is really interesting to me, and most people don't really understand that there's a time and a place for it. But timing is nothing unless you've worked at it and you can see it when the time comes. Like everybody kind of expects shit to come their way. Right. I don't believe anything comes your way unless you are prepared for it. And so this, you worked really hard. I mean, you've worked with Johnny and you've done tremendous historically. And you're probably going to ask me this question is my personal history.
Yeah, let's
go there right away.
Yeah, let them be relatable to you. Because you've led
Yeah.
many lives, like you said. You've literally probably already led 5 or 10 people's lifetimes in one.
I don't know about that, but I think it really starts off with somebody I really respect said, you get lucky in life twice. And I think that's very true. I truly believe that. And the first time is where you're born. Like if you're born in a favela, it's pretty tough, right? And my mission is to help those people born in favelas. So like yours. The second time is when you find your life partner. And I think that's really, really important. Because I don't think success can be measured based on how much money you have. I think success can only be measured in what you've achieved in life, and have you done it with your entire family intact, right? So are your grandchildren hanging out with you? Are your kids, your adult kids hanging out? It's a privilege to have that. That kind of thinking didn't happen, to me until much later in life. I mean, my background is, essentially abandoned at 6 months to grow up with my grandmother, who was really quite tough. She had 5 boys. My uncles had grown up, and she was pretty battle hardened. The old belt came out from time to time, but I guess I was always crazy because I used to drive her completely nuts. She would take the belt to me, and I'd be like 6, 7, 5, 6, 7. I'd just go out, and she used to love growing roses. And that was her thing. She grew all kinds of roses. I just go pick up a pot and just shove it down on the ground and smash it. That was my reaction function. So you can imagine how freaking crazy I was. And most people would have put me in an asylum, I think.
I'm going to say that here on this show, we say that you understood how to stand up for yourself at a very young age.
I don't know. I just didn't appreciate. I mean, listen, she was the most amazing person in the world. And the principles, some of the things that she taught me and the principles of life that I go by are very influenced by her. But the craziness was really, I loved competition, and I ended up really spending just time playing sports. Rugby and cricket is where I grew up. And then, I wasn't really that interested in school. So, it wasn't something that stimulated me until I finally figured out what I wanted to do. Then it was a different case. But she taught me. So you talk about mentors, right? And where you're born, the mentors who really influence your life, and then, finding your life partner. The first part of it happened before I was even a teenager. My grandmother was a huge mentor. And the one thing that I always take away from her is she used to always say that you are a privileged individual. Therefore, you have an obligation to help the less privileged. And that's an important thing that I've given my kids. And I think it makes you happy. If you help people, it makes you happy. We all want to be happy. There's so much positive energy when you help someone. The second part that I was lucky with before I was a teenager was meeting my wife, who is my life partner. And she's a lot smarter than I am, and she kind of helped me grow as a human being. I mean, I was just a little ugly, crazy boy, and she was a lot more, she's a lot smarter. She's the PhD in the family, so but much better put together than I was. I was just a rebel because, not later. I didn't find out this till later when I finally went to see a shrink. Somebody, why I was so rebellious. It had a lot to do with abandonment. And so, again, you learn all this stuff. but you have to put yourself out there to learn it. And I didn't learn that till, I was in my late 30s. So by that time I was in the hedge fund industry. I had two wonderful kids, and the hedge fund industry was destroying my soul. It's a fabulous industry. Don't get me wrong. It attracted the best of the brightest, and I loved it. But the competition, and it's a constant competition, which I liked, but it was all about how much money you made. Well, that's the business. Yeah. You don't get paid unless you made money.
Yeah. Well, if you want to do good in the world, it takes money to do good too.
Yeah, but I wasn't in that mindset of doing good, by the way.
Right, I get it.
Yeah, I was in that competitive mindset. And that's when I met my second mentor, and that was Julian Robertson, who just an amazing individual, gentleman, family-focused person, brilliant investor. And he knew how to find talent and pick talent. And when you're around talent like that, you just get better and better. It's helped me with where I am right now in a massive way. Unfortunately, he passed away a couple of years ago. But we used to have, breakfast every so often on a regular basis, and I would learn something from him every single time. Billionaire, but you wouldn't think so. Humble. And family was so important to him. Church was so important to him. That community was important to him. And he gave away his money, and testament to his career and ability is the Tiger Cub community. If you Google Tiger Cubs, you'll see how many investment funds that group spawned over the years, and they are some of the biggest in the world. And there is no other individual that can claim anywhere near the success of creating that Tiger Cub world. But yeah, it's, talking of money, money is great. And I had lots and lots of really nice luxury things and did wonderful things. One good part of it is, obviously educating my children and making sure that they had a solid foundation from which to grow. But it also, I think, made me not such a nice person, because you become an arrogant bastard suffering from hubris, which is the worst thing in the world. Hubris is terrible.
So for those of us like me who didn't go to college, how would you help us to understand hubris?
Yeah, I mean, think of it as you're so successful, you're making, I'll give you the money angle of hubris. You're so successful that you think that, you're the master of the universe, and that nothing is going to derail you. You are so arrogant that that you're on a path for self-destruction, and that is, if you're on your own, that's going to be really painful, because when it happens, there's nobody there to help you. I was lucky. When it happened, there were people around me to help me, and people who protected me. We're very lucky. And that's, and then you go, oh my God, that's not who I want to be. And, and my philosophy is very simple. If you don't want to get out of bed and do what you're doing, then you got to change it immediately. And that's kind of what I do.
So talk about creating. I want to back up the bus before we get too far down there and talk about a couple of things you talked about: your family, privilege, obligation to help others. right? And there's a story that you told, and this is I think a really important thing that I want us to touch on in this conversation. I remember you sharing a story with me about how your daughter encountered, I'm hoping this, you know, this I'm talking about, where she ran across somebody who was like a school or something, and she didn't think that either she could get accepted to school or couldn't get the funding. And somehow, because of, you know, your daughter's exposure, she knew, right, like a different path to help the girl, which then, yeah, share the story then, please. I think it's beautiful.
You know, like I said, you get lucky in life, right? The first time is where you're born, right? If you're born in a poor situation like a favela, you're not going to have much opportunity. Okay, it's all about opportunity, and my kids got the best of the best of a New York private school education, and the message to them was, guys, you have no debt, you've got the best of the best. I need you to go take the risks. I need you to go and stretch. I need you to not go to college thinking that it's an experience. That's all I ask. I created a foundation called Sri Lanka Care. We built 567 homes in Sri Lanka. My kids went in the summer to work building homes in 90-degree, 100% humidity weather. And that can be quite humbling. I remember my son came back and he was a very different person. You begin to appreciate what you have. That was the purpose of the trip, really. And you see what privilege is. So in my daughter's case, she's, I don't know if I told you, but she's a math and business major that went to work for Walmart's e-commerce business, and now she's studying doing her master's in social work, right? So very different. You know, I hope that I had something to do with her choosing to help people rather than being in this sort of rat race. She volunteered at this place, and what they did was tutor high school kids on how to go through the application process for college, and it's usually the minority and underprivileged kids, right? So it's up in Harlem. She used to go there every Wednesday, and she gets assigned this Hispanic girl, obviously very bright, but nobody in her family or extended family had ever gone to college. She wants to be a nurse. And my daughter's role was help her get into nursing school. But then, you know, she did the usual thing that I do, which is, hey, let me get to know you. And I'm always trying to, you know, massage people's careers. So she did that thing. Because whenever she brings friends around, I'm sort of the interrogator. You know, I like to know everything about them. So she probably did the same thing. I like to take credit for it, but she got to know her and said, "No, why don't you apply to a pre-med program, and we'll figure out how to get a scholarship." And she did the research. She figured out how to do it. She got her client to do the research and guided her and said, okay, this is what we need to do. And she got into a pre-med program at Holy Cross, which is a tier 1 top tier university in the East Coast, and full ride.
And there's a part that I remember you telling me the first time that I'm just going to add it in here, which was that the girl didn't believe in that she could be more than a nurse or something like that, right? Oh. And so because of what your daughter has been exposed to, she believed bigger. How important that is, right? To have those people around you that believe and have seen bigger, and that can help you to see that and to be there. And anyway, so that's
so education is supposed to do that for you, but it doesn't. Education is, you know, in its purest form, is opening your eyes to what's within the art of the possible, right? If you look at really brilliant people, they have this common characteristic, which is they're incredibly intellectually curious, right? They're always asking why. How does this happen? Why? This goes back to my earlier comment about rote learning versus iterative learning. Rote learning makes you stupid. I mean, it just doesn't, there's no retention. Iterative learning is really important, and, we just don't do it. You do it in a PhD thesis, but how many people get to that point? I'm not about trying to tell you that the education system has to change it. That's just not my thing. What I am about is when I ask somebody questions, right? I'm really hoping that it will trigger something in them. Like, why are you doing this job? What is it that stimulates you? Why? And if you can't explain that to me, you've got the wrong freaking job. You've got to, when somebody asks you that question, your eyes need to light up about, what do I do? Like, you asked me about AI and how it can be used in banking. I'm like all over it. And I want to know everything about it. And if somebody tells me something that I should know and I don't know it, I get really pissed off with myself. So that level of intensity and competition is critical to your success. But opportunity and opening up your eyes to this opportunity that you don't need to go to nursing school. You have the credentials to go to a pre-med program. It's going to be hard, but why not try?
Well, you talked about something really important, which is the art of, first of all, the art of the possible. Based on my high school career, many colleges didn't see my attendance there in the realm of the art of possible. So, I went through the school of hard knocks and figuring stuff out. And interestingly enough, right, that's how I learned. It's provided me, my edge and things of that nature. But like what you said, and this is always a thing that I've always really appreciated about our complement in what we kind of both bring to the table in our various perspectives in business, life, et cetera, is that, like you said, you had privilege in going through, a certain level of proper education and communicating, right, and all that kind of stuff. Right? And just as a result of that, there's just a certain way of thinking or expecting or understanding that you have that is a certain foundation that, like that we were talking about earlier, allows you to navigate unknown situations much more comfortably than, let's say, than I do. Right. I struggle in some of those things going through the first time. But also as a result of not going through traditional schooling, right? Like, I don't even know what's possible. Right. Anyway, I know there's a lot that I missed. And so,
no, I think
go ahead.
You didn't miss much. I mean, I think education, listen, I'm not in the Peter Thiel camp that, everybody should not skip college, but it isn't for everyone. That's number one. Number two, if you're already good at learning, how the hell is somebody going to teach you? You're going to go where you can learn the most. And if you're mature enough to do it, then, hey, go do it. Jason Ma, and
Oh yeah.
He's doing a PhD in neuroscience and computer science, and he doesn't even have an undergrad degree. Okay. The really great thinkers, they think, and they're brilliant, and they don't necessarily need to spend and waste time. So I think education is good for the vast majority of people, but there is that 1% that doesn't, can survive, and you're one of them. So I think it's,
I'm glad that's what this show's all about, is helping those minority people to feel good in their skin and confident and comfortable, and to appreciate that difference instead of feeling, like a fish out of water.
It goes back to mentors. Okay. My grandmother always, she just believed in me. Yes, she was tough and disciplined, but she really believed in me, and she taught me that anything is possible. And you need somebody like that. in your corner to help you. So in my case, it's been Michelle, my wife, in the latter stages of my life, who said, look, it's very stressful, but the thing she would say is, of course, well, you don't know how to fail. So that's true. I don't accept. I don't mind. I mean, I'm not scared to fail, but I don't accept it.
Yeah.
You know, I don't give up.
And that's just called the learning process.
Yeah, it really is. You get knocked down. And I've been knocked down so many times in the last 8 years. When you get knocked down, you've got to look at all of the things, the intangibles that need to work. Like in my case, Johnny and Qigong had a big influence on me, on how to control my mind, how to not let my mind go like a crazy monkey in my head down these rabbit holes and iteration and put yourself in a dark place. You know, I didn't understand that my brain speed was really, really high, and that is not a good thing for when it comes to depression. So these are things that I only learned much later in life, and it made a hell of a lot of sense.
But let's talk about getting knocked down, because this is, I think this is a really important point. And this is where, like, you and I have talked about before, like, you know, look, money isn't everything, but there's no doubt that it can, you know, make certain things easier and otherwise. And so when
don't get me wrong, I like money.
Oh no, yeah. I mean, look, it's in today's world, it's a necessity to do what you need to do, whatever that might be, right? I mean,
you know me, I like nice cars, I like motorcycles, I like all of those things.
Yeah, and you also do good with your money too, right? So, you know, I know you're not going to highlight that or talk about that, and so I won't embarrass you by bringing that up, but I will balance the scale for the record. That's all that, you know, I'll leave it at that for you. All right. But believe me, people, he is, you know, he has helped out plenty of folks. And so, but then getting knocked down and getting back up is a really important stage of life. Right. And so I think that is one of those things, right? Like when you've been exposed and had success, and, you know, different types of doctors and therapists and coaches, right? Like you have a whole different tool chest to get to pick yourself back up with. Right. Okay. And so I think this is what I kind of want to talk about in a few places, is helping people to figure out how to level the playing field for themselves by thinking a little bit differently, or learning how to question some things, right? Because like you said, not based on where you're born, it is like certain things are what they are for everybody. Right. When the world isn't going to change to give everybody equal opportunity and equal access and exposure to things overnight by any means. Right. How would you start to tell people the ways to think about picking themselves up and getting knocked down, like the questions to ask, how to look and understand what resources are available to you, right? How to never believe that whatever you see is as good as it gets. There's always something more, right? And to keep going. Yeah. Well, anyway.
It's about understanding why things are happening, right? I mean, within the context of where you're going.
Yeah.
Okay. So I can explain it through my journey. I come out of school and I want to be in the investment world. So the question is, how do you get there? So first step, I need to become a really good analyst. So I become an investment banking analyst, working 100-hour weeks, and that gives me that training. Then I'm constantly looking for, how do I get my foothold in the investment world? So I get an opportunity to go into the proprietary trading side. And then I get lucky because the head of that business decides to go off and start a hedge fund. So you work really hard to become the number one, so that when you get the opportunity, you get to start. Right? You want to be able to make an impact immediately, and that takes discipline and training, and it doesn't happen. Nobody's going to hand it to you. But if you aren't skilled, i.e. trained, when that opportunity comes, they're not going to take you. And you got to be very fortunate in terms of building that up. Sometimes you can get a little ahead of yourself and you're out of your depth, and you will be pushed back. If you're pushed back, you know, it's like playing for a team. I mean, if you're in there too early as the quarterback and you haven't developed, you're going to get crushed, and it can have a severe mental issue on you. And life is the same. It's not that much different. But once you start to get there, you need to be able to surround yourself with great partners, great people, great family, because you can't do it on your own. Because here's what happens. You're going to get knocked down. When you're knocked down, I don't know if too many people can just shrug it off and get up again. You've got to have a system, right? And resilience is something that a lot of people don't have. I think a lot of people accept failure. You can't be afraid of failure, but you can't necessarily accept it. If you accept it, you're done.
Right. That's the only time that failure really occurs, right? Is once you give up. Otherwise, like we said, it's just learning.
It's never failure. It's learning it. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just learning until you quit.
And a lot of people, because of the education structure, don't believe in a test and learn culture. They don't believe in that. I'm not afraid to be wrong. I'm always going to try and test to see what is within the art of the possible. Like, I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about what I'm going to tell my data scientists to be working on. I've already, this stuff that's in my head, and I'll call them up in the middle of the night, and it's a terrible thing, but that's how my brain operates. Some of it doesn't make sense. Some of it may never be used, but it's important to test. It drives people around me, as you know, crazy, because I do go off on this end. But then that's the vision, that's the mission, is how do we get better constantly? How do we get better? And
so how do we get better? I'm wondering, you've used that same thing, and to also do good while also, doing well for yourself and living in the capitalist world, which is, your approach to some of your product development, that this is also an important part that people don't talk about enough, right? Is the
look, I believe in a mission-driven initiatives. This is why I left the hedge fund industry. I felt that I wasn't doing anything that was productive to the world other than making rich people richer, right? Which is fine. Listen, as long as they go do something with it, then I do something with it. That's a way of doing it. But I was more intrigued by creating something, and that creation was, hey, how do I solve this problem? There aren't that many huge problems in the world to solve, and you'll see everybody's got these little companies that, mine's still a little company, but I'm trying to solve a big problem. But how do we get credit to people who are completely ignored? I mean, I was telling you earlier today when we were on that call that, in the refi market for mortgages, the average FICO was 780. If the average is 780 and a range from 850 to 500, there's something very wrong with that, right?
Oh yes, there's definitely a lack of people looking out for the consumer in a lot of markets.
Yeah, and so for some reason that I sometimes regret, I chose to operate in the financial services industry, which has so many problems. I can't solve all those problems, but what I can do is make these institutions much better at lending. That's step number one. If I can succeed in that, then the next step is to make them better at managing risk and helping people. Ultimately, I believe that these institutions need to become liability managers, right? Everybody has an asset manager, but nobody has a liability manager. In a high rate environment, managing your liabilities can save people a lot of money. It can actually make them more responsible spenders and actually reduce losses. Because if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, this is from personal experience. I came to New York. I had a child, literally 6 weeks old, and I was working a 100-hour week, and I wasn't earning very much. And I think big. So I went and bought a 3-bedroom apartment in Manhattan on the East Side. So just think about that. It's the craziest freaking thing to do.
You weren't allowed to fail. You had significant responsibilities to take care of.
Right. But the thing is that most normal people will get a 2-bedroom apartment and rent. I went and bought one.
Well, I guess what does that mean that I didn't realize that then, Wije?
because I thought, and I did my research, and it was, in the early 90s, it was the bottom of the New York real estate market. Everybody wanted to sell everything under the sun. And so I bought. But what it meant was I had to go to the grocery store with a calculator to make sure that I had enough money in the bank account. So when I slid my debit card in, it wasn't going to get rejected. I mean, seriously.
Yeah. I've heard you share the story. So yeah, I know you're being genuine.
And so I believe a responsible borrower is first and foremost a responsible spender. So a lot of our work is about understanding spending behavior. And I believe that this is the future state of risk analytics, is how do we lend the right amount of money to the right people and do it at a fair price? If we do it properly, everybody's cost of credit is going to drop. And that's my goal.
And so I want to give a stat, and then I want to bridge that why that's also so important is like, and you also on this, so I was on this morning's call, we also made the statement that like there's a lot more than the credit score alone to determine someone's, financial responsibility. Right. And you've taken that approach in your credit model to be way more than a credit score. And as a result of that, right, your model has been able to, from the same audience, right, increase, please correct me if I'm wrong, right, but like 20 or 30% increase in the amount of people that now met the lending criteria. So you lent to more people and reduced the default rates by 30% overall, which is
50.
By 50%. There we go. Even more significant, right? Yeah. And think about that. And this is within the last few years, right? And this is considering all of the experts and how things have been. People get taught how to do things, whatever else, and so everybody comes out of school doing the same stuff, right? But like you said, you have a curious mind, and you said there's got to be a better way to look at this, and you proved it, right? Even all these people say, "Oh, we've looked at it, whatever." Right? No, you've proven that there's a better mousetrap, and there's a better way to. And then, so where the story that I wanted to share with that you shared with me of how you also got into was like the micro loans and the women in the villages. And so when you're able to get the credit to the people that will, that are responsible and will do how that compounding effect. Would you mind kind of sharing that story before you jump in your thought?
I mean, our whole thing when we were doing this work in Sri Lanka after the tsunami was we would build these houses only. We built the houses, and the deal was you get the house for free, but the condition was that you send your kids to school. So we had rebuilt 4 schools, and we had gotten the buy-in from the principals of those schools to ensure that that mandate was taken care of. And they loved it because we added to the school, both in terms of new facilities, a computer room that they never had, and things like that. The ultimate goal was to educate the girls, because girls are far more, developed in terms of their brain, and we needed to get that level of responsibility on. And they were the ones who became the productive members of the family. They were already doing the simple stuff like creating homemade products. And one of the things that they would create is rope that was made from the husk of a coconut. When you look at a coconut, everybody sees the brown thing in the middle, but it comes covered in this husk, which when you separate and you soak in water, you can separate each of the fibers. And these are long fibers. They separate them, to dry them, and then they use those fibers to weave rope. And they would sell these ropes to a wholesaler that would rip them off, right? And ultimately, these ropes became very large mats. It became irrigation protection devices, things like that. So it was a matter of creating an opportunity for them to bypass these wholesalers and help them. And that was one of the things we did, which was, again, it boils down to opportunity. We created the opportunity. We did the same thing with with the fishermen. A lot of our work was along the coast, obviously, and the families we helped were fishermen, and they would go out and catch the fish, but they would get ripped off because the wholesaler was the one making the money, supplying to the local hotels, for example. So we changed that. And the reason the wholesale makes money because they create the bulk, right? So each fishing boat had only a small supply. So we changed that. We brought in a refrigeration capability. And so now they could stock up and they could sell bigger units directly to the hotels and make more money. It's little things like that. But opportunity goes to the next generation. So the story that sticks in my mind the most about this is when the tsunami happened in 2004, I went down, I was in Botswana in the middle of a game reserve when that happened. And I remember getting a call and saying, I lost family in that. And my grandmother barely survived because she lives on the coast and the water was just all over. When I went there, and I'm driving through this, it was like Berlin, right? All the buildings were completely destroyed. I met this woman who begged me to take care of her son. Said that husband was a fisherman. He didn't return. So he was out there when the tsunami happened. They'd never found him. This lady begged me to, she said, the first thing she said was that my boy is very smart. He's very bright, but we don't have any way to support him to go to school. And for some reason, we took down his name, her name and address. And for some reason, I have no idea. But when we decided to go and do this, we found them. And we took care of the kid through scholarships and books. We paid for all of that. And we provided transportation. We managed to get her a house. We built a house for her, despite the fact that she didn't qualify for all of this stuff. Anyway, cut a long story short, 6 years later, I'm in Sri Lanka. This is why you give, okay? This is the reason I'm giving you this story. 6 years later, I'm in Sri Lanka, and I don't like doing these things, but you have to go and you do the sort of auditorium thing. And anyway, I'm sitting there, waiting to get my people to talk about me, which makes me feel uncomfortable. But I'm sitting there talking. I can't remember who I was talking to, but then this kid gets up and starts speaking pretty good English, and he's talking to me, right? He's looking at me and he's talking to me. He says, "You don't remember me." I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I'm not sure I did. You don't remember me, but my mother, you spoke to my mother 6 years ago. This kid is 12 years old, and believe me, he was malnourished and he was tiny. But you helped me go to school, and now I'm in law school. There's nobody from that village that has ever gone to university, okay, let alone law school. And that's it's totally emotional. This is I get all very emotional about it because it's amazing. And that's the definition of opportunity. If you can create the opportunity, there are people who will jump in there and take advantage of it. So he goes off to law school. Now he's created a whole group of people that will go to law school because he did it, right? We did the same with girls going to nursing school. All it took was one, and then there's a flood. So it's the belief, right? It's opportunity. It's the belief that it can be done. Our job is to create the opportunity and say, you need to believe me when I tell you that you can do this. Now, I didn't have anything to do with him choosing to go to law school, okay? But somebody told him that he should go.
This is the importance of both challenging the status quo, which is near and dear to my heart, as well as demonstrating just and why it's so important. And why I'm now adopting the term focusing on the human potential, because right, like, because you demonstrated what I'm talking about is that their world is full of highly intelligent, competent people that just because they might not fit into one system, or because they're not getting access or catching that same break, that's all that it is, right? And again, just what you're talking about is just with so many examples of why those things are so critical and why it's so important to focus on individuals and looking out for what each individual needs, as opposed to keep going. Go ahead, jump in.
No, Graham, it's important in life in general. Even when you hire people, I treat my team as if they were part of my family, which is also not very good, because it creates its own set of problems. But I believe that my job is to nurture them, and if I treat them well, most of the time, 9 times out of 10, they will do amazing things. And I've had success with that, so there's no way I'm going to change that. But I've also had quite a few failures on that, and the reason I've failed, I think, is that I've overvalued these people. And I think that's a big mistake. So I learned from those mistakes. But the amazing part of it is we ended up with a core group of people that are still with us, and it's really nice that Jason Ma, for example, came to me when he was 21 years old. He's 28 now.
That's crazy.
It's crazy. I mean, and he's brilliant. He was the most brilliant person, even
I love
at
that
21.
kid. I love that guy. Yeah, I could say so many great things about him.
Yeah, and so and it will be your privilege to have known him, because he's going to go on to do amazing things, okay, in the field of AI, that you're going to be reading about it.
Well, why aren't we working with him on it? What do you mean reading about it? Why aren't we involved? What did we miss?
we are involved. I mean, he's
all right. Well, then how do I? All right. Anyway, I'll take this offline of how I get in. All right. I'm understanding why there's not the third chair. That's all right. I'll get my chair up to this table. Don't you worry. Okay.
but it's again goes back to that original principle that my grandmother said: if you are privileged, you have an obligation to help the less privileged. So in my case, I want to try and create opportunity and belief. And the other part of it is really a Mother Teresa quote, which is, if you can't feed 1,000, feed one. Because it's really amazing positive energy when you've done something like this. Forget about your first $1 million or whatever. Forget about that. That's a nice feeling, but there is no better feeling than what I had when that kid started talking to me. There is no better feeling.
I would agree. And so I know that we're a little bit over here. So I'm going to kind of wrap up just by saying, so the first place, I think how to create opportunity and belief for yourself starts with asking yourself a bunch of questions, right? And only you, so, listeners. And so you got to figure out how to ask the questions to unlock your stuff, right? But it's, where do I want to go? What training is needed? How do I get to the training? How do I get my foot in the door, right? These are some fairly universal questions that Wije touched on that can be applied to so many areas, as well as then also challenge yourself to get outside of your circle, to get exposure, right? Because you just never know what you're going to come across, and getting exposed and coming across something is so important. Look like you're getting ready to jump in and say something there, Wije.
No, I think this is really important, and I'm so glad that you're doing this and sharing it with people. I believe mentors matter. I believe discipline is really, really important. You've got to have some semblance of where you want to go, and you need to stick with it. Remember, there are no free lunches. Nobody's going to hand you anything. And you've got to find a way to create that opportunity, right? Like going into the investment hedge fund world didn't just happen. I happened to be working really, really hard, and I was a tier one operator that got invited to be in it because it's an exclusive club. Um, and you've got to believe in yourself. You got to trust your instincts. All of those things. It's not one thing that drives success. It's so many things, and luck doesn't have a hell of a lot to do with it. I just don't think that.
No, I think I've heard like chance favors a prepared mind, right? You've talked about training and being prepared for stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think a lot of us get a lot of opportunities that sometimes we don't even recognize in hindsight because, to your point, we weren't prepared, right? Or maybe it wasn't even that right time, right? There's so many different things, the timing of stuff as well, right?
And I think, but if you can find mentors who have followed not necessarily follow the path that you're looking at, but who know how to ask questions, right? You've got to be able to understand why you're doing something. Then you will know how you're going to do it, right? If you don't know why, then there's no way in hell you're going to know how. That's why every single time, if I don't understand something, I go, please explain why,
I've always been impressed by your humbleness, in conversation to acknowledge what you don't know, and considering how highly intelligent and how much you do know. No, I mean, that's a very, that's a very rare skill, so I want to compliment you on your ability to lead by example on that.
I'm not so sure. If you put me in front of some dumbass who thinks they know everything, I'm not very humble.
Oh, no. I'm saying I said you're humble that you're willing to listen and you're willing to inquire, right? Like you said, if you believe, like a humble person acknowledges that there may be stuff they don't know, then just is even willing to ask the question, right? You may realize the person has everything to offer to say, but the fact they're willing to ask is what matters.
I think I have very little respect for people who think they know everything, because nobody does. I think most people are afraid to ask questions. And one of the things I pride myself is not being afraid to ask questions. I don't mind looking like an idiot because if I don't know something, I don't know it.
Right.
Okay. It's okay. And somebody might say, oh God, that guy doesn't know shit, but I didn't know. So I asked. A lot of people are afraid to look bad. That's not a good thing.
No.
You can't be afraid to look bad, because if you don't know something, admit it.
Look, that fear holds a lot of people back in their personal and especially professional growth too, right? It's that curious mind finds that nugget of information, that opportunity, that way to connect a dot that somehow that creates to something else, right? You know that. You've seen it happen a gazillion times.
But the other thing is, I learned this later in life, that being able to control your mind and not have it be a crazy monkey running around is important. And a lot of the time we don't know why it's the case, right? You haven't been tested. You don't know what is causing this. I had an amazing data scientist. I mean, he was the nicest, most amazing person in the world, but he had such a fast brain that it took him to dark places. The iterations, right? He was like, his brain was so fast that it took him down really bad places. But then there was nobody there to help him control it. I mean, I tried everything I possibly could, but he thought I was trying to kill him. and it's sad, but you've got to understand what's going on. And I'm really good with my data scientists because they are extraordinary, but they're at the same time not normal. They are unique individuals with absolutely amazing capabilities, would not function very well in a normal organization, but they're just, I guess, part of the craziness. You got to know someone to whatever they call it. Takes one to know one.
That's right.
And that's probably what it is. But everybody has talent. It's just nobody's figured out. Not everybody's figured out how to harness that. Right, individually and externally. Right, internally and externally. Right, like, yeah. And then the other part of it is a lot of people take situations for granted. When you meet someone, when you find this amazing talent, you've got to never take it for granted because it's very rare. It's the same with relationships.
And so I'm going to pivot to, speaking of rare, just to wrap us up, because I know that like I said, you've already been gracious and gone over that. What's also rare is what I talked about, which is what you've accomplished with your model. I always want to do this at the end because you've been kind enough to share a story, and so I know that there's definitely people listening that are working a business, that are trying to figure out, in the financial services sector, that are trying to figure out how to increase their lending. And so if they want to understand and look at more about, what Aaliyah and where would they go? Where would you tell them to, or if they wanted to reach out to you, would you tell them?
Yeah, I mean, it's really, we have a I think a pretty reasonable website. It's called Aaliyah.com, ALIYA.com, where we explain what our contribution is. As I said earlier, we want to help financial institutions become much better at lending and helping their customers. We do this in a very unique way. We have figured out how to leverage the bank account transaction data to determine the allocation of credit more efficiently. That's very unique. Nobody else is doing that. And what it allows us to do is to lend to find more credible borrowers. It allows us to reduce losses by 50% versus the current system that is deployed in typical banks. And it actually has the knock-on benefits that we were talking about earlier, which is how do we help people manage their financial life and reduce stress. Financial stress, I believe, is the root of a lot of problems. Both in terms of stress in the household, but also in terms of depression, because when you are encumbered with the kind of stress of debt, right, it is debilitating. It's very debilitating because you just don't know when something is going to get taken away from you. I don't think that's the way banks should be. I think banks should be able to predict when things are going bad and be able to reach out to them and say, how can we help you? Because look, bad things happen to good people.
Absolutely, all the time.
And we treat every bad situation as if they're bad people.
Yeah.
Which is, we'll send you a late fee, and we'll send you another late fee, and then we'll report you to the credit rating credit bureaus.
Or the best is, like, you don't have we're gonna give you a fine for having insufficient funds. You didn't have enough money before, so now we're gonna take away even less than what you did.
So this is the kind of change I want to bring. And look, it's never going to happen quickly. But if we build and show the tools, and we're doing this with a mega bank, then others will follow.
that's what it's about, right? It's just when you prove it. Anyway, yeah, and I'm
Yeah,
excited to see I'm excited to see how this next chapter of ours unfolds together. And because I know that, by the way, this is definitely not going to, we're going to, figure out, well, sure, this is gonna be one of those things where Chris, you have to edit this out because I lost my thought. So we did a great job. We got through like an hour without me losing my thought in a full conversation. That's good, right? So I'll just I'll just kind of then wrap this up by then saying, and so please, so there's plenty of people out there everyone's looking to grow market share. Everyone's looking to increase ROI. So, and, Wije's given a lot of great examples of how he's bringing some new solutions to old problems and new answers to old questions. And so if that sounds like something that can benefit you, I would encourage you to reach out, right? And like we talked about the compounding effect, and, and so all we can do now is we put out the good vibes in the world and in the universe, and we see where things bring us.
Yeah, and you can find me on LinkedIn, and it's Wije Wijegoonaratna. So the last
how do you have to spell that one for people?
Wijegoonaratna. But most of the time with Wije you can get it.
Right.
And Wije and Aaliyah, you should be able to get it.
Cool.
Look, thank you very much for the opportunity, Graham. I really appreciate it, and congratulations on all of the successes you've had in the work you've done in improving yourself.
Thank you.
It's very commendable.
Thank you. I appreciate the acknowledgement. And any last minute, like you said, any last minute positive tips, beliefs, pump up statements to leave the listeners with?
Follow your instincts.
There you go. Beautiful. That's exactly what this is all about. It's helping people to understand their instincts so they can follow them. So hopefully everybody, you walked away with some better understanding, with some information that can help to expand and improve your quality of life, and have a fantastic and awesome week.